Hello, today we are going to talk about my absolute least favorite topic when it comes to Mexico because it gets so emotional. People get super riled up about this, and the topic is tipping. Tipping in Mexico. How much should you tip? Who should you tip? All of those things, we're going to talk about it. But to help us out with this conversation, we're going to start by talking to the locals because I think it's always helpful to know what the locals do in these different situations. Talking about money is generally super taboo, and there's a lot of mixed emotion, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of judging, there's a lot of so many things happen. It's a multi-layered emotional issue, but we're gonna talk about it because it's the right thing to do. So first off, hello, if you're new here, my name is Anne. I'm a single mom of one, and I've been living in Mexico for the last almost getting close to 3 years. What I decided to do for this video is ask some locals. Now, all of these people are my friends. They are all locals, meaning they're all born and raised somewhere in Mexico. And you might be surprised by some of the answers, some of the responses we got from these different people. First, we're gonna start with my friend Martin. He does speak English, and he was awesome enough to actually leave a voice message when I asked him who to tip and how much.
It depends on every single person.
First of all, can we note that Martin is Mexican and he speaks with a British accent? Anyway, okay.
It depends on every single person. If you want, because of the service, if the service was amazing, was wonderful, I don't know. Yeah, it's just like up to you. Some places it's like you have to pay that tip. In the majority of the places, it depends on you. So if you want to give some tip, so you are able to do it. If you're not, no. But then, despite of this, many people get angry because if you say, well, the service wasn't good, so it would happen on the tip. What is it?
So he's talking about in Mexico they make you pay the tip. While giving credit to his perception, I think what he means is I've noticed that a decent amount of restaurants here in San Cristobal, I did not notice it as frequently in Merida, but here in San Cristobal, when you get your receipt, your bill, it will add a propina to it. It'll add a servicio to it, and that's the tip. I've only ever seen 10%, but it does happen frequently in restaurants here that your bill will include the tip. Now, legally, I don't know if you have to pay that tip. Again, it's 10%. So I don't find it quite as offensive because I think that is generally considered the amount you're supposed to tip in Mexico anyway. But from probably a more local viewpoint, I don't believe Mexico is allowed to necessarily do that. And so he is maybe a little offended that it happened.
For me, obviously, I just tried not to give that 10%, but then I tried to give some, because obviously I'm against this kind of situation. If the server was good, so then I think the tip should have I don't know, some situations like it should be included in the payment with the waitress or the waiter. I don't know. I hope it helps.
Okay, I don't know if you caught that. He is the first Mexican local that I've heard express this idea. I don't walk around asking people on their opinion on tips, so that's probably why. But this is an opinion that I've heard a lot from the US. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the fact that, so I'll start with the US. In the US, we have a federal as well as state minimum wages for employees, right? Some locations have $15, etc. Like it's a heated topic. Waiters do not fall under the same minimum wage standard. Anyone who is considered to make their living off of tips, so this usually covers waiters in particular, because they get tips, their boss literally does not pay them a minimum wage because the tips make up for it, which is astounding to me. It's a little more detailed than that. Just so you know, in the US, the expectation is that the customer pays for their wages. In Mexico, a similar thing happens where there's a lot of waiters, and not just waiters, delivery people, etc., who do jobs for a company, a business, and the business either doesn't pay them at all or pays them a very low wage, and so that earner makes a living off of the tip. This is the first time that I've heard a Mexican, tell me that he thinks it's horrible, essentially, that a waiter or a delivery person or whomever does not get a standard of living. just from his job. And then when we tip, it should be for excellent service. It's, you know, something above and beyond the norm and not a responsibility. Because again, here, I would say a lot of people consider a 10% tip to be a responsibility of the customer, regardless of service. So that's kind of the argument that he's bringing up. But again, one that I've never heard a local say. I hope that makes sense. I found this intriguing. So he's saying that he does not pay 10% because he doesn't want to necessarily promote that. If I understand him correctly, that's what he's saying. Very, very cool concept. Because he only responded talking about restaurants, then I asked him a couple other questions. I'm like, okay, so that's super interesting. Aside from restaurants, who else do you tip? And he's like, really nobody. He thinks the car park, so meaning when you go to like Walmart and such, there's car park attendants that help you park. They make sure you don't get into an accident, etc. So there are people that work in the parking lots. That would be another location that he would consider paying. So then I asked specifically taxis, lavanderias, people who sell tamales on the streets, water delivery. And so he's like, no, it's unseemly to do. You just pay the price that the lavanderia or the taxi driver tells you to pay. You don't pay extra. It's not the norm to do that. So that's from Martin. So thank you, Martin, for letting us know how you feel about tipping. Very cool perspective. So glad I asked him. Okay, so next person I talked to is my friend Blanca. So she was saying for food and drink services at restaurants, bars, coffee shops, etc., she generally gives 10% of her account, right, of whatever the bill is. And she mentions that this is usually displayed on the bill as a suggestion, emphasizing the fact that a restaurant cannot force you to pay a tip, but they do usually tell you what that 10% is, at least here in San Cruz. Taxis, tamales, all the other things. And she says, in general, different cities in Mexico, no. Maybe the street vendor. She's told them to keep some extra, around 10 or 15 pesos for a street vendor. You'll notice that she's not saying that it's a percentage of what she spent at the taco stand. And taco stands here are relatively inexpensive. So a 10 and a 15 peso is possibly more than 10% of her total charge. Again, I didn't ask the nitty gritty of that, but she's mentioning a flat fee, 10 or 15 pesos for a street vendor. And then delivery and taxes in general, you just pay the service that they charge. So for example, when I order from Chedraui, I pay Chedraui, which is a grocery store, I pay them a delivery fee. And so she, in this case, is saying that that delivery fee would be considered going towards the delivery driver, and so you would not pay an extra. I will say for myself, there are a lot of companies that are known for not necessarily giving all of those tips to their drivers, etc. Uber is famous, for example, for not giving all of the tip. So it's always recommended for a lot of these services to tip in cash. So kind of a sidebar, when in doubt, pay your tip directly to the driver or the delivery person in cash as opposed to electronically, because it's hard for me as a customer to know which app services actually pays their drivers and their delivery people the full tip, right? Because when I tip a taxi driver or delivery person, I'm expecting that entire tip to go to the driver. Now at a restaurant, it's a little bit different. I understand that restaurants will sometimes share with the staff, like the chef or the hostess or all of that. Like I understand that my tip is often shared, but for a delivery person, my personal expectation is that it goes directly to the driver. Really the only way to guarantee that is to pay that person directly and to pay them in cash. Even, by the way, at a restaurant, I'm told that weird things can happen if you pay your tip with your card. Let's say you're paying your tab with a credit card at a restaurant. In the US especially, I would just add the tip to the charge as opposed to pulling out cash. Well, here, it's much more accepted. It's easier on everyone if you pay that tip directly in cash, because then you can guarantee that they're getting the full cash amount. Again, probably still splitting it amongst like the cooks, etc. But they're getting it, as opposed to, number one, there being a delay. Number two, sometimes the service fee is taken off of the tip, and so you're not actually tipping the amount that you think you're tipping. So all of that. So that's from Blanca. Blanca, thank you so much for answering this question. Again, I really love the discussion of paying a tip in a flat fee. For the street vendor, she's not saying 10% or 15%. She's literally saying 10 or 15 pesos. Okay, and the next person I asked is my friend Elvia. You'll notice that I asked her in English, because Elvia speaks English, and so my default is always English. But Elvia answers in Spanish because she knows that I'm trying to improve my Spanish. And so when I see her in person, she's always speaking to me in Spanish. It's sometimes super stressful that she does this, but at the same time, super helpful that she does this. Thank you, Elvia, for always encouraging me to press on with my Spanish, which is gracias, Elvia. And yes, so let's look at her answer. In Mexico, it is only customary to give to people who work in restaurants, specific for waiters, 10 to 15%, that is the normal. Delivery men, when they do not charge you for shipping. Again, same thing that Blanca said, if the service already charged you for a delivery fee, you're not expected to pay an additional amount to the driver. To gas, so here in Mexico, if you don't know, you do not pump your own gas. You have an attendant that does it for you, and so it is normal to tip 10 or 20 pesos. Again, you'll notice this is a flat fee as opposed to a percentage of how much gas you purchase. So 10 to 20 pesos when you purchase gas. To the tour operators and to those of aesthetics. And I think when she means aesthetics, she might be talking about like hairdressers, salons, beauty, that kind of thing. When it is not their business, then you would tip. When it's not the owner, so again, generally speaking, and this is also in the US, by the way, you do not tip the owner, you only tip the employees. And so she's just stressing that fact that, yeah, you don't, if it's the owner, you don't tip, it's the employees that you tip. When you go on a tour with someone, unless it's their business, you are expected to tip. Again, this, in my understanding, would still be that 10 to 20% concept. And this is because a lot of these types of employees have a very low or sometimes none base pay plus a tip. Similar to that waiter concept where they technically might get a certain amount of salary, but it's very, very low. And so the tips are how they compensate for that. If it's not the owner, you would normally tip all of these people. So she has a milk distributor who belongs to a large company, and the man does not have a base salary. He literally only lives on tips. Other people that only live on tips, if you ever go to Chedraui or Walmart, you will sometimes have a bagger, someone who bags for you. Usually these are much older people and they live off of those tips. She didn't address that directly, but I am told 5 to 10 pesos. But if they are bagging, and if you're doing a lot of shopping and they're doing a lot of work, you would maybe tip 20 pesos, etc. And so this would not be based on how much you're spending at the store, more how much work that person is doing. So a general one bag amount might be 5 to 10 pesos. But again, if you've got a lot of groceries or purchases that they're having a bag for you, then you would pay more because of the work they're doing. So that's kind of the concept that she's talking about here, which is awesome. She also mentions in terms of taxis or people who sell things in their homes, generally, no, you do not tip those people, which is gracias, Elvia. So next is my friend Koki. She is the only person I talk to in person because she does not speak English at all. And then also my Spanish is not that great. So there's certain topics that I think are potentially emotional. So talking about money generally is a little bit taboo, it's a little bit scary. And so especially if I can only speak in Spanish, if I think the other person doesn't understand English at all, I'm very nervous about it because Google Translate, while great, is just not 100%. There's so much information that gets lost in translation when you're texting, even in your own language, but especially when you're texting and translating and so this friend I actually talked to in person. I did write out a little script for myself so that we could kind of read it together in more of a line by line. Hey, do you tip this person? Do you tip this person? And so I asked her about taxis. Do you tip taxis? Taxi?
No.
Do you tip a lavanderia? She paused.
No, porque tienen sueldo.
She paused for this one. She paused. And then she said no.
Possibly because the idea of tipping a lavanderia has just never occurred to her.
People who sell tamales in their homes, she said yes, you would tip. You would tip. She did not say an amount.
For tamales?
Podría
So
ser,
it's similar to restaurante?
sí.
Because restaurante.
Restaurante, ellos ya ponen ahí la propina que viene incluida.
Sí.
Restaurants, of course, she was like, yes, you would tip 10%, something like that. So, okay, cool. Now, delivery person.
Repartidor, sí. Ya póngase usted los de pizza, pan, o lo que usted lo que mande pedir.
So she was saying for like a pizza delivery would be 20 pesos is what she would imagine you would pay.
¿Cuánto necesito por
El monto, muchos les dan 20 pesos, 15, ya dependiendo de uno.
So this I thought was a good moment to ask her in my very broken Spanish, what if I'm ordering 10 pizzas?
10 pizzas necesito más propina.
No,
Uno pizza.
Una pizza, 20 pesos, pongamos.
Okay.
Unos propina, pues unos sus 30 pesos.
Okay.
Mucho, sí, no.
Oh,
Sí.
okay. Muchas gracias.
I believe what she was trying to explain is that the driver is doing the same amount of work, whether he's delivering 1 pizza or 2 pizzas. And so when I mentioned 10 pizzas, she's like, okay, if they are doing more work than usual, yeah, so sometimes this would apply. I think if you're ordering from Chedraui or something like that, the sheer amount, again, not the amount you spend so much as the bulk, right? If they're carrying a lot of things for you, then maybe you would want to tip more. She said you might want to tip up to 30 pesos if you're ordering 10 pizzas. She would probably tip 30 pesos, whereas if it's 1 pizza, 20 pesos would be considered the normal for pizza delivery. So I love this. I love that she's not giving a percentage. And there was a YouTuber and he was talking about how he went to a restaurant and so his total bill was 50 pesos.
This behind me, this is one of my favorite spots. They've got breakfast combos for as cheap as 50 pesos. And I'm gonna show you guys what one of those looks like. So here I am at breakfast. I'm having a 50 peso breakfast. And at the end, I said, don't forget to leave a tip. And I put down 5 pesos, which is a 10% tip.
So many people got upset with him in the comments of his video because they're like, 5 pesos, that's not even worth tipping. And this I found fascinating because I've had these same thoughts. I prefer the hole in the wall places. I prefer the places where it's really very, very inexpensive foods. And just for myself, I lean in the 10 to 20 to 30% range when I give a tip. And there's lots of reasons why I might tip the higher amount. Now, in this particular video, in the comments, you've got mixed reviews. You've got some people that say, yeah, never tip less than 10 pesos. And then you have other people that are like, it's a 50 peso meal, 5 pesos is perfect. Or some people don't tip at all. Like, so you got this wide range. And now the only people I tried to focus on in his comments are people that said the words, I am a Mexican. Now, I'm sure there were other people that are Mexican that just didn't elaborate that they were Mexican. They kind of just said their opinion because I don't think it necessarily matters. I'll be honest. In this video, I am talking to locals, talking to Mexicans, getting their perspective, but I'm seeing a wide range of opinions of who you tip, who you don't tip. Why? Because everyone's an individual in Mexico. Like that's the end result. Everyone has their own opinion. They have their own ideas of who they should tip or who, there is no one size fits all Mexican. Everyone is different. Everyone is unique. Just like there's no one size fits all American, right? Everyone's very different. So what am I trying to say? Do what feels right for you. Do what feels good. Do understand, do take into consideration that there are employees who do not get paid a normal and full wage. And so they live off of tips. But take into consideration what Martin said, which is that if that's going to change, if paying your employees less than a living wage is something that you want to get rid of, then we need to somehow get rid of this tipping culture. It's a dilemma. And I do feel as a foreigner, this is just my opinion, as a foreigner, it is not my job to change Mexico. So as a foreigner living in Mexico, I just need to do what I think is the right thing. At a restaurant, I will always tip at least 10%. Okay, and the last person I was able to speak to is of course the amazing Barbie Blanco from Merida Moves. I was not able to record the audio, however, I took notes. So number one, she started with the baggers at the larger grocery chains. These are usually older people who are at a point where they really can't get a job anywhere else, but they can help you with your bagging. And therefore, these large chains allow them to work at their store, so they're not getting paid by these big chains. They're simply allowed to work there. Their whole income is dependent on your tip. It is customary, like I mentioned, to pay 5 or 10 pesos. Barbie is a huge fan of being more generous with these people and paying 20 pesos when she can, and maybe even more if they're bagging a lot of things for her. So she pays very generously to the baggers. When you're getting your gas filled, generally it's a 5, maybe 10 peso situation when they're not doing anything extra. However, if they do go above and beyond, cleaning her windshields, etc., this is where she would definitely be in the 15 to 20 peso range for that extra amazing service. Barbie is also very pro paying 10 to 15% at a restaurant, 15% of course if it's amazing service, 10 for kind of your everyday normal service. However, she did make a distinction between a restaurant and let's say the small mom and pop side of the street type of places, the places where they're making food in their home and just kind of selling it right out their door, those types of kind of smaller places, she recommends tipping high. So again, in these places, you might only pay 50 pesos for your entire meal, but paying 10% in this type of situation is very much frowned upon, especially if you're able to pay more of a tip. She would say that 10, 15, and 20 pesos is probably the norm at these smaller, much more affordable locations. Parking attendants at malls or larger grocery stores, generally you would pay 2 pesos for not really helping too much. However, if they do really help you in a jam, if they help you to avoid an accident, etc., this is where the 5, 10, 15 pesos might happen. Barbie does not tip Ubers or taxi drivers ever. And she told me she used to be an Uber driver, so she understands that a lot of foreigners do tip taxi drivers, and of course they don't mind it at all, but as a Mexican, she never ever tips taxi drivers, Uber drivers. She just pays the fare. When it comes to delivery drivers, again, if this service adds a charge, so for example, Chedraui, they do add a delivery fee. She does not pay extra unless it is a very difficult situation. So for example, if it is raining super, super heavy, she knows that delivering in these heavy rains is much more dangerous, it's much more time consuming. And so in that situation, you absolutely would pay a higher delivery fee. And of course, there are many, many restaurants where the delivery driver does not actually get paid by the restaurant, and you'll see it in your charge. They're not charging you extra for that delivery fee. That means the onus is on you to pay that delivery driver for that service. And so with Barbie, I was also able to ask, is over tipping a problem? So we're not talking about the 10, 15, 20% tippers. We're talking about the 50%, 100%, etc. Is that a big deal? Is overpaying a problem? And so in Barbie's opinion, for certain services, so let's say you're going to a restaurant and you over tip, she doesn't necessarily consider that to be a huge deal, because in the scheme of things, you're probably not going to the same restaurant every single day or going to the same place all the time. You're just a random customer who happened to pay a very large tip and then you disappeared. Most people, even foreigners, do not tip a crazy amount, she feels, in the restaurant industry. Now, Barbie did mention that when it comes to things like housekeepers, gardeners, nannies, the people that clean your pool, etc., generally speaking, you do not tip these people in terms of every time they come to your house, you don't give them a tip because you're giving them an appropriate wage. Now, it is expected at the 1-year mark that employees will get a raise. It's also expected, of course, during Christmas time. There's a special pay that does happen, but that's separate from a tip. That's more on the subject of course, paying people. But when it comes to tipping your housekeeper, gardener, all those people, there are certain times where it's appropriate. For example, perhaps on this particular day, your house is a tragic mess. You had a party, you've got everything everywhere. Okay. This is where you would say, listen, it's not that I'm increasing your pay, but today the house is extraordinarily messy and I'm gonna pay for the extra hours of service you're doing in my home. Or similar to the delivery guy, if the housekeeper is going to your house on a very rainy day, the buses are later, maybe they even miss their bus because the rain is affecting, like, does that make sense? That would be a great situation to give a little extra that day because of those extenuating circumstances. Okay? From Barbie's viewpoint, and Barbie's of course been living in Merida for a long time, she's seen a lot of expats coming in and doing what we do. These are her recommendations for how you would handle paying more if indeed you want to pay more. So I hope you found this video super helpful. I really enjoyed making this video because I love talking to people and asking them about their actual experiences, their actual opinions. While I might get a gut feeling for what a local might do, or like, you know, you can start to make assumptions, I guess. At the end of the day, it's so much better to actually talk directly to people and ask what their real opinion is. You're gonna get a much more accurate answer. You're going to get a much more accurate picture of how they really feel about whatever topic it is that you're bringing up. So, and I hope you didn't find this video too, you know, emotionally draining, too triggering, because we are talking about money, we're talking about tips, we're talking about possibly, you know, changing the financial culture of a location. It's a big deal, I get it, but just know at the end of the day, everyone is doing the best they can. Everyone is doing what they think is best for their country, for their location. That's really all we can do, right? Is the best that we can with the information we have. And now you can see at least a handful of local people. Again, these handfuls, they do not represent all of Mexico. Mexico is millions of people. So this does not come close to representing everyone, but sometimes a handful of people is a great place to start.